Back here with Rick Bucher, and we're talking LeBron and the Lakers. What do you do to fix what happened this season? Well, according to LA columnist Bill Plaschke, he's hearing the solution might be not to fix LeBron and the Lakers, but to remove LeBron from the Lakers. That is, if Phil Jackson gets his way. Here's what he said on the Doug Gottlieb show.
I've heard that Phil would like LeBron traded. I've just heard that. But I've got nothing to back that up. No on-the-record stuff to back that up. But I think Phil, I do know that Phil would like them to keep Westbrook and try to make it work with him. A lot of what we see coming up is going to be Phil's fingerprints and where that stands with LeBron. Yes, I don't think he loves LeBron. But again, I think Jeannie would overrule him on that. But it's just it's such a dizzying collaboration. There's so many cooks. And I was like, Jeannie, why don't you just hire one person to run the damn thing? An outsider, an outside voice, a non-Laker. And she's like, everybody collaborates. I'm a collaborator. I'm going to keep collaborating. And I'm going to rely on the people I trust.
Nick, I'm chomping at the bit here. I'm dying to know what your reaction is to this.
Well, it's like this specific interview was designed by an algorithm just to infuriate me. Because right when they got done talking about that, Doug and Plaschke did a 3-minute relitigation about how the 2020 Clippers were actually better than the Lakers and how the Lakers wouldn't have beaten them and their championship doesn't count. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Well, I just had to listen to about how Phil Jackson is going to get overruled. Overruled? He's not even officially with the team. They overruled. And then I have to listen to Phil. If Phil is saying, he doesn't really like LeBron. You don't say. You mean Phil and LeBron might have a little bad blood? But this isn't a basketball IQ test. This is like walking. I've always said if I ran an NFL team, one of the first things I would do if I was going to hire a head coach is I'd take him to a blackjack table and watch him play. I'm like, oh, you stay on 16? I'm not hiring you. Oh, you don't split eights? Get out of here. Like, some of these things are obvious. And if you watched the Lakers last year, Rick, you're like, probably can only keep one guy. Should it be Russell Westbrook or LeBron James? You know what? I think we can make it work with Russ and just cut our losses with LeBron. Well, you're either two doors you can walk through. It's either a personal beef or you're a total, utter idiot. So I don't know which one Phil Jackson would rather walk through. I have an idea which one it is. But listen, I'm just glad Jeannie Buss is taking advice from her godfather, Magic Johnson, her best friend, Linda Rambis, her best friend's husband, Kurt Rambis, and her ex-fiance. Because that usually is how the best businesses are run. This is so dumb. So dumb.
Yeah,
I can't believe.
Well, look,
ahead,
Doug and Bill are right. If there wasn't a bubble, that the Clippers would have beaten the Lakers.
Oh,
but let's
shut up.
We'll put that aside. And since I am giving,
turn your own microphone
I'm
off.
giving love advice.
Thank you, Rick.
I'm giving love advice.
Smartest thing you said
I have
all
to
show.
add this. This segment. Love and business. You don't mix them. Jeannie, you're bringing Phil Jackson in, and I was okay with the idea that Phil Jackson was going to advise you on who you were going to hire as your next coach. I am not bringing him in to advise me on personnel or the structure of my roster because I've already seen that show in New York and I know how well it didn't go. So I'm not going there. But all that said, I can actually understand why someone would think, man, it's too bad we can't trade LeBron because at least he has trade value. If we're really just pie in the sky, want to rebuild the Lakers, at least LeBron would bring us something. Russell Westbrook, I'm not going to get anything for, so trading him isn't necessarily going to change anything. It's thinking that and then immediately going, yeah, but that's not reality, so let me get back to reality and what I'm dealing with because LeBron James isn't going anywhere, doesn't want to go anywhere. What I don't do is I don't say it out loud. And I certainly don't say it out loud where someone like an LA Times columnist might hear it and repeat it and say, I don't have anything to back this up, But this is what I've heard. Because what does this do for LeBron James, or as far as your relationship with LeBron James? I'm sure LeBron wasn't happy from the start that Phil Jackson is being brought in as an advisor. That can't make him feel all that great. But now you actually are listening to Phil tell you, hey, you know what? We should maybe think about LeBron being expendable. What do you think about that? This is it's not a basketball IQ thing. It's a organizational chemistry issue that we have presented here. And I also love that Bill doesn't say who he talked to, but he goes from saying, I heard this, to Jeannie and I were talking about this. I'm like, Bill, I don't know whether you intended to or not, but man, you had all fingers pointing toward Jeannie as saying, hey, you may not believe this, but Phil thinks that maybe we should move on from LeBron. It is a bad look all the way around and only makes their off-season challenges even greater.
Rick, it's Exhibit F, G, L, whatever you want to, how deep you want to go into the alphabet, that Phil Jackson, the greatest coach in NBA history, should not be running a franchise in any way, shape, or form. All right, like you said, we already saw it. And you might say, well, he doesn't even work for the Lakers. But Plaschke said his fingerprints are going to be all over this thing. We saw this act in New York, and let me get specific. He fired Mike Woodson a year after Woodson led the Knicks to the second round of the playoffs. That's the only time they've been there in 2 decades. All right? He replaced him with Derek Fisher, his former player, mistake. Replaced Fisher after he fired him with Kurt Rambis, former or good friend, mistake. Replace him with Jeff Hornacek, mistake. We know the personnel decisions that were made, mistakes all around. And now here we go again. You're choosing Russell Westbrook over LeBron James? I would get it. I wouldn't agree, but if somebody said, you know, Phil's about the triangle, Phil's about ball movement, and LeBron's a ball-dominant player. And you can talk all you want about Jordan. Jordan shot a lot. He shot a ton. But he wasn't ball-dominant. Nobody in that triangle was ball-dominant. And if you said that, okay, I wouldn't agree, but I would be like, okay, logically, I get that. But then to say, yeah, LeBron can't fit, but Russell Westbrook can. What? He's way more ball-dominant than LeBron. His basketball IQ is far lower than LeBron's. Like, what are we talking about? And that's where the Knicks point, it shows that this is personal, and Jeannie is letting that poison get into the franchise. It's just a mess. I mean, my good, like Rick said, or Blaschke said, hire somebody as your head basketball guy and let him do it, period. If it's Pelinka, let Pelinka do it and stop listening to the whispers of all these other people out there. Crazy, Wilds. It's crazy.
It's fair. Okay, so just for the sake of the discussion, and I'll throw this to Nick, let's say that Phil Jackson is not 100% motivated by a personal beef with LeBron. Let's just open up your aperture a little bit and say, maybe this is the right move. The guy has won 11 championships and has coached some, 3 of, I think, your top 10 greatest players of all time. So it feels like he knows some qualities and what it takes to coach a great player. And he's saying LeBron should be moved. Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that next year we're talking about the reasons to keep LeBron? I hear more, and granted this might just be media
about
talking
Kareem's
leaks,
record.
about breaking Kareem's record in a Laker jersey than I do about winning a championship. It's like, he wants to be in a Laker jersey, break the record. It just doesn't feel like the ship is pointed in the right direction. And maybe Phil, I'm just speculating, but maybe Phil sees that. Maybe Phil like, wow, we're like focused on the wrong thing as an organization that has only been above 500 twice in the last 9 years, has only made the playoffs twice in the last 9 years. So I'm just going to put it out as a creative thinking exercise for you. If it's not personal beef, what do you think it is?
I think Phil Jackson lost his fastball a decade ago. I think you want to count championships and great players. Red Auerbach is right on that list. I wouldn't want him coaching the Lakers or advising Jeannie Buss either, but that's because he's been dead for a decade. Like, I mean, give me a break. But, like, stop it. There's a lot of all-time greats that are no longer know what they're doing. With all that said, nothing would thrill me more than if LeBron James got traded from this travesty of a franchise the Lakers have turned into. I would be delighted. I'm not a Lakers fan. I want to watch LeBron James play big basketball games. So I would love if this happened. But as my job, dripping in objectivity, I must call it as I see it. And if you watch the Lakers, you're like, I'm going to make it work, run the triangle with Russell Westbrook, and we're going to move on from LeBron James. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Look, it's going to be an interesting summer for the Lakers, however you look at it. Let's get back to the playoffs, where the Lakers currently do not reside, and one of the most shocking outcomes of recent memory. First things first.